Hey y'all, what's up? Hello, welcome to the first wrap up of the year. I feel like so much preparation, at least for me, goes into wrap ups. I always feel like I have to do so much to prep for wrap ups, which is probably not true. Like, I don't have to do it, but I do. I make sure my spreadsheets are up to date, that my stack of books is ready to go. It just feels like so much preparation for, my wrap-ups typically do end up being pretty long videos, and then the editing process just feels like a complete and total mess. But hello, welcome, first wrap-up of the year. It's nice to do wrap-up coming off of a massive reading slump in 2025 to start 2026 feeling like, okay, I think I still got it. Like, I still do like to read. So if you are new here, I think that I have had some new people find my channel since the last time I did a wrap up. So if you did not know, I do talk a lot about a lot of the books that I have talked about in vlogs, but I still do wrap ups anyway, just in case like vlogs are not your thing, because vlogs are not everybody's thing. And that was going to adjust. My bad. Hold on. Let's fix this. There we go. I didn't realize it was sitting on my pencil. So yeah, I end up doing a lot of vlogs, but then on top of that, I do wrap-ups under the assumption that not everybody wants to watch vlogs. So my wrap-ups typically work in this format where I give you a little statistical information based off of Allie's spreadsheet, which I got the new one that she created for 2026. It is a single year. I did have the 5-year one, but I like what she did with this new one, and so I'll give you statistics from that, and then I break my wrap-ups up into several categories. The first being picture books, then children's, which is books that are typically aimed at children ages 6 to 9, and then middle grade ages 8 to 12. YA/teen, I think I'm going to just start saying teen because I feel like there's this whole confusion about the difference between YA and teen in publishing and in the book community. When I say YA, I mean teen, meaning that the intended audience is anywhere from the ages 12 to 18. And then now, I haven't done this in the past, I will be including adult books in my wrap-ups because I have started talking about adult books in my vlogs. It just makes it a lot easier where I'm not avoiding talking about these books. So it just makes my life a lot easier. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some statistics. I'm going to be looking down only because I don't have any of this stuff memorized off the top of my head. I will probably have screenshots of anything that I'm talking about in this area right here. So let's go ahead and get started. So month of January, I ended up reading 30 books for a total of 6,147 pages. I listened to 85.7 hours on audiobook. I did not reread anything. I read 2 nonfiction books. I acquired 10 books, but I did check out 18 books from the library. I am being more adamant about keeping track of that this year. Even though I do work at the library, I do want to see what, like, money wise, like what am I saving by not buying some of these things. And then I read 9 books that are a part of a series. My average rating this month was a 4.0, which is really, really good. I did have one DNF, although I haven't put it in here, and that was Caught Up. I did end up DNFing that because I was not a fan of that. My highest read genre for the month was contemporary. I read 17 books where the primary genre was contemporary, and that's 56.7% of my reading. Following that, we have 10% that were fantasy, 5 books, 16.7% that were historical, 2 nonfiction for 6.7%, 1 paranormal for 3.3%, and 2 romance for 6.7%. That looks like 67. I was like, there's no gosh. And every time I hear 67, I hear 67. God, the time to have children in this period is wild. In terms of format, I read 2 graphic novels, 2 manga, 14 novels, 1 novella, and 11 picture books. In terms of the authors, 3 of the authors I read were debut authors, and that was 10%. 18 of the authors were authors I've read before, so 60%, and 9 of the authors I read were new to me for 30%. So it's always nice to see that I am trying new authors and reading authors that are making their debut. All the books I read this month were traditionally published. I want to say unfortunately, but I am reading some non-traditionally published books right now that are carrying over from January, so that number will look a little different in February. In terms of the format that I read, I did 12 books. 12 books were audiobooks, 2 were ebooks, 15 were physical, and 1 was a mixture. Most of my books this go round came from the library. So 23 titles came from the library for 76.7%. 2 I classified as own, which is 6.7. 1 I had on Audible, which was 3.3%, which I don't have my Audible subscription, but I'm trying to get through the books that I already have on Audible that I had purchased. 2 were from book boxes for 6.7%. So it's kind of interesting because although that owned is 2, it's not really 2 because you have to think the book boxes are books that I also own. So that number is a little skewed there. 1 of the books I read, I actually bought this month. So that was nice to see. It's so technically there are 5 books that I read from my own personal collection. That makes sense. In terms of audience, 3 of the books I read were for adults, and that put me at 10%. 5 books were for a young adult audience at 16.7%. 11 were middle grade at 36.7%, and 11 were children's. Now, children's also, I put, like the picture books, I classify as children's. So that's why, because you're going to be like, you are going to say you don't have any children's books. Yes, I am going to say that. Most of the books that I read this month were published in 2025. I had 21 read in 2025, 2 from 2024, 1 from 2023, 1 from 2006, 4 were from 2026, and 1 was from 2011. So we're reading a lot of frontlist things. In terms of where my books, and this is interesting, I never know with like country, whether author background, setting, like how to really take into consideration the country data. But I have 27 titles that are from the US, 2 Japan, and 1 from South Korea. So hopefully, as always, I like to see that number change up just a little bit as the year goes on. The shortest book I read was tied between 3 picture books. And the longest book I read this year was A Year Without Home, or I read so far this month was A Year Without Home, and that's 432 pages. That is definitely going to change in the month of February because I was reading some tomes in January that are now carrying over to February. In terms of, and I don't know why this isn't necessarily a statistic anymore. It's not a statistic for each of the months, and I used to like this, so I may have to do this myself. But 23 out of the 30 books that I read in the month of January had some form of diversity. So I always like to see that. I wish that that was, I think you can see that maybe, yeah. So you can see that in the month by month, but I used to like to see the percentage, but clearly 23 out of 30, that is more than 50%. So those are the stats that I have. What I decided to do a little differently is that typically when I used to do the picture books, and I don't know how much of that was like jacked up because my hair was on the mic. Hopefully not all of it was. But I have, in the past, what I've done is I've listed every picture book that I've read. I am going to change that because I am planning to ramp up my picture book reading, and it is somewhat, to be quite frank, it is somewhat of a hassle to have to basically put in these images, because the picture books I'm reading, most of them are coming from the library. It's too much on me editing wise. So what I'm going to do now is, you know that I've read 11 picture books. I'm going to show you some of the ones that I really enjoyed from this month, and I'll do that every single month. So one of the ones that I enjoyed was Night Flight, and this is by David Barclay Moore, illustrated by Brianna Mukadiri Uchendu. And they're both John Steptoe New Talent Award winners. And this one follows a little boy who is struggling because his dads are out for the evening. And it really just highlights the beauty and the light that comes from family. I really like the illustrations. I think it's a good read aloud. And it's a good nighttime book. So if you're looking for any type of nighttime reads, looking for something that you want to use as a read aloud for story time, I think this is a good one. This is, I think, a perfect one for like Pajama Rama. Like if you do Pajama Rama, which is like a nighttime story time, if you are in that position, it's great. The next one is The Polar Bear and the Ballerina by Eric Velasquez. Now this one is interesting because it is a picture book that has no words, and essentially it follows a little girl who is a ballerina that encounters a polar bear, and the polar bear wants to see her dance in the ballet. And some people had issues with what the perceived kind of like, I guess, commentary on this was, because people were like, well, there are people of color who are kind of denying this person that's different, this polar bear that's different, from having access to the arts. But for me, I think that I interpreted a little different, and I viewed it more from like a class perspective, and how access to the arts is not only something that can have racial barriers, but also class barriers. So I enjoyed that one. The other one that I have is 7 Ways Through the Woods. This is by Jen Reese and Devin L. Kurtz is the illustrator on this. This one has some of the most, this is the cover. This has some of the most immaculate art that I have seen ever. And it literally is about carving out your own path and taking the road less traveled. I love this art in this book. It is fantastic. Look at this. Just look at this. Look at that artwork. See, this is why I love picture books. Like, it's just the simplicity, but also this level of complexity that exists at the same time. And it's just fantastic. So, when I picked up that one, I was like, oh, I have to show that one because the artwork is just fantastic. The next one I have here is Family Feast. This was written by Carol Boston Weatherford, illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, and Carol is one of my favorite writers, Frank Morrison. And it's Family Feast, and it literally is just about a family getting together and everyone cooking and contributing. And I would not recommend reading this on an empty stomach because the descriptions are just so vivid. And I mean, this iconic Frank Morrison art, like I know Frank Morrison's art no matter where I'm at. Like, look at that spread on that table. Is absolutely delightful. I adore that book. And then those are all 2025 releases. The first 2026 release I have is actually more of an informational picture book. And when I say informational picture book, I mean that it is nonfiction. and it is called Troubled Waters. This is also by Karen Balston Weatherford and also illustrated by one of my favorite illustrators, Brian Collier, and it's A River's Journey Towards Justice. This is a book that is written from the perspective of the Alabama River. And so you follow this river as it describes from the beginning of time, and what it witnessed, the atrocities that it witnessed to Native and Indigenous communities, talking about enslavement, and then eventually making it to the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is built over it, and the march to Selma, and just everything that this bridge ended up witnessing. I appreciate the fact that this book also wove in spirituals. So of course, Wade in the Water was one of the songs that I think will be like probably the most obvious for people whenever they read it. That's one that they will automatically recognize, but there are a couple other that are in there too, and this artwork is just fantabulous. So those were 5 that I really enjoyed, and there were other ones that I really enjoyed too, but I just did not hold on to them. I just wanted to highlight those. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into our next category. Like I said, children's. I didn't read anything technically in that category this month, but we probably will see that change in February. So we're going to go ahead and dive into middle grade. Now, in middle grade, I read 11 different titles. And so we are going to slowly make our way through everything that I ended up reading that was considered middle grade in the month of January. It is quite a lot. I'm going to be as quick and concise as possible just because this video already is probably going to be excessively long and I don't want to make it any longer than what it's already going to be. So the first book that I ended up reading was Pasta Girls by Taylor Tracy. This is the same author that won the Stonewall Honor for Murray Out of Water. Now I want to go back and read Murray Out of Water because this is their second book. And I literally was just in our children's area at work and I saw this cover. Now granted, it's always weird when I tell people this because they're like, well, don't you like select the books? Yes, I know. But when you select hundreds of books at a given time, you often forget what you've selected. And so I saw this and I was like, oh, that cover is absolutely beautiful. I did not know what this book was going to be. And I decided like, okay, well, you know what? I am just going to check it out and we're going to go with it. It actually is a sapphic Romeo and Juliet retelling, and I thought it was really cute. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It follows 2 main characters, Ro, which of course is going to be your Romeo character, and Jules, and their 2 restaurants are 2 battling restaurants, and the 2 of them don't know each other. There's this festival that is happening where they happen to run into each other, and there's this kind of like instantaneous spark between the 2 of them. And Ro, I think, has a little bit more independence than Jules, where Jules has a family that's in the restaurant industry, but she knows nothing about cooking. And so they end up making this deal where Ro teaches her how to cook, and they build this friendship, and clearly there's an attraction between the 2. And it's kind of interesting because you can kind of see scene for scene like the parallels to Romeo and Juliet, but at the same time I felt like Taylor Tracy put like their own twist and spin on it. I thought the characters were really dynamic. I think that it had one of those endings that I really appreciate in middle grade where we don't get the perfect resolution, because you have to think their parents don't get along, right? And you have these 2 girls who end up developing a friendship and then romantic feelings for each other. And then it's like, well, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And I think that the author did a really great job kind of helping them reach the point that they needed to reach. I think that this is one of those books that is a great like tween romance. And I think that it's great that we have queer representation. I know that there's been a surge in tween romances lately, which is good because we were kind of missing a lot of content in that area, and that we didn't have content, but it's nice to have a little bit more. But a lot of those books are geared towards cis het couples, and so it's nice to come across one where we do have two queer couples where they talk about their queerness and their identity and their own struggles and how their communities perceive them. This was just really, really well done, really, really fascinating. Like I said, I ended up giving it 4 stars. Now, complete like opposites of Pasta Girls, we have Barry Parker Doesn't Catch Crushes. This is by Tanita S. Davis, who I really, really enjoy as an author, and I picked this one up thinking that it was going to be another tween like romance, but in actuality it is more of like a commentary or insight to what it's like for that age group to experience crushes from their counterparts, like their peers. So the best way I know how to describe this basically is Barry Parker is going through a lot of change. She sees her mother not very often. I don't want to say her mother is a free spirit, but they have this time that they meet in August that is supposed to be like their dedicated time. And you can tell very quickly in the beginning that there's something different about how her mom is moving. And it's because there's this potential that her mom is forming a new relationship. At the same time, her dad also is thinking about the possibility of dating. And then at the same time, all her friends went to a summer camp that she did not attend, and her best friend comes back and she has developed a crush. And so there's this kind of weird feeling of like, okay, everybody's kind of pairing off. I'm not ready for that. I don't understand why we're doing this. And honestly, it's making me quite uncomfortable. I really enjoyed that because one thing that I think we take for granted sometimes is with this age group, they're already going through a lot of change. But I think Tanita did a really, really great job capturing how overwhelming that change can be. And sometimes I think as adults, we forget what that feels like because at a certain age, you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. You learn how to navigate that space, and it's easy to expect a teenager or a tween to do the same thing, and they're not capable of doing that. It reminded me of when my mom and my stepdad first got engaged and how weird that all felt, and honestly how uncomfortable. And it wasn't that anything was wrong, it's just that you're at that age where it's like, I'm not ready for that. And it seems like this whole idea of relationships is changing everyone. And so she really, really struggles with that. And the changing dynamics that she's seeing from everyone, it strongly impacts her. There's also this conversation about changes in friendships and what that ultimately looks like. And, you know, when friendships change, does that mean that friendships need to end? This was really, really well written. I loved the character growth and the kind of familiar relationships that are described throughout the entire book. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next one that I ended up reading was A Year Without Home, and this is by V.T. Bedania. And this is a 2026 release, and I have never read anything by V.T. Bedania, but this is a middle grade book that has Hmong representation, which is something that I look for because it is an underrepresented group in Kidlit, and I've read only maybe about 2 things with Hmong representation in them. There's more, but I've only read 2, so this is the 3rd one that I have come across, although before I thought I had only read 1, but that wasn't true. And a lot of the books that I had read that had, or the books that I've come across that have had Hmong representation are usually like post what's happening after they are able to get asylum, like here in the States. So A Year Without a Home is a historical fiction book that is based off of the author's family's experience. She draws a lot from what her sister remembers in their transition from going from Laos to the United States. And she, of course, changes names and everything to protect privacy. But it gives you the historical basis as to why things are the way they are right now. So I had no idea that what ended up happening was you had families like our main character who lived in Laos, and there was, of course, the time the Vietnam War, the United States pulls out, right? And the United States pulls out, and it kind of leaves everybody in limbo, where you had communist forces coming into Laos, basically on the rampage to say, like, whoever was supporting the US and any type of rebel groups, like, you're sent to a reform camp. And of course, with those reform camps, people would go and they would not come back. And we're following the main character. Her father served as a person who kind of in the military pushed back against those forces, and he gets word that it's time for them to go. The United States leaves, and then people are just stuck because they're like, oh, well, maybe a plane will come back. And they're like, no, nobody's coming back. And so we follow the family as they are trying to leave and get to a place of sanctuary. I believe they go to Thailand so that they could end up in a refugee camp waiting to see if they could get asylum elsewhere. And at first it's kind of like, oh, we're going to go home, but it's like, go home to what? Because at that point, all the homes where they lived, their communities were getting destroyed. Family members were disappearing, dying, being killed, and not heard from ever again. And I think that I like historical fiction, not that I like the tragedy, but I think it's good. It's a good teachable moment for kids to understand. This is that empathy piece again, especially what this country is going through right now, what we're seeing in Minnesota right now. These books are good points of empathy to understand what a immigrant's experience is like. I think we've been taught so much wrong that we don't know what's right anymore. And we view people who are not from the United States as othered so badly that we don't have any empathy. And I like books like this because I think empathy starts young, and books help guide, teach, mold, whatever word you want to use here, that empathy. And it shows kids that there are kids who have had these experiences, same ages as them, that have had to deal with these tough things. And this is why people seek refuge, why people seek asylum, why people are wanting to be here, right? And I personally, even as a history major, I did not know any of this. And it's also great insight to how the US gets involved in a lot of things that happen globally, destabilize countries, and then we dip, and then we're like, oh, we don't know why they're acting like that. So we have this, I even listening to the author's note, where the author was basically like, so the CIA recruited Hmong people to help them in their war efforts. And so you're recruiting these people, you leave them, their country's essentially destabilized. You have people trying to almost ethnically, not even almost, like trying to get rid of an entire ethnic group. And so then as a result, you have people put into situations where they're forced to leave their homes and they seek asylum, they seek refuge. It was really, really good. It's written in verse, so while it's over 400 pages and it's the longest book that I read, it actually is a very, very quick listen on audio. I also listened to another historical fiction, and that is Hattie Mae Begins Again by Sharon G. Flake. I have interesting feelings about this one. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. It's not a sequel. It's more of a companion. And I can't remember what the name of the first book. I believe it's like Once in a Blue Moon is the name of the book, if I'm not mistaken. If I've got it wrong, I'll correct myself. But I feel like the publisher kind of did a disservice with this, because while you don't necessarily have to read it to understand this book, I do think that it gives you kind of context for characters. So Hattie Mae makes an appearance in that first book, even though I believe that first book is told from the perspective of her brother. And we're following her in this book as she makes a trip from the South up to Philly. So during that time of Great Migration, and I think what the book did well was that it shows kind of this class issue that existed in the Black community. It shows Black wealth. We often don't have conversations about how Black wealth has existed historically. We get to see a little bit of that. We get to see this dichotomy between the North and the South, and kind of, I don't know if it was the author's intention, but kind of these conversations to distance yourself from your Southern heritage, the way you dress, the way you talk, the way you act. It's seen as kind of low class and ignorant in some ways, and that still can be the case sometimes. And I find it interesting that it's very much so centralized in this book to the Black community. This one for me felt like a more diverse option for people who are interested in The Little Princess by Frances Hodges Burnett, because there's some of those same like stylistic choices in terms of, we have a main character going to a boarding school, and there's this mean girl that she doesn't get along with. She goes in the girl's room, loses her ring, and then there's some issues that it definitely like reminded me of some specific scenes, at least from the film The Little Princess. But it wasn't a bad book. Clearly I gave it 3.5 stars. I just felt like character wise, I would have done better had I known to read that other book first prior to reading this one. And I think that in terms of being introduced to Hattie's family, I would have had a better understanding of the familial dynamics had I read that first book, if that makes any sense. The next one that I ended up reading was Hikaru and the Light Volume 2. I can't really say much about this because it is Volume 2 in the series, but I will say that the series overall is following two characters as they are venturing into becoming pop stars, and it's about being idols, like how grueling the process is. They are trying out to be idols, and there's this really huge producer that comes back because he wants to pull idols specifically from Japan. And we're following the main character. I believe she's only around 14, and she can really sing, but she's learning that to be an idol, like having a good singing voice is not all that you need. I read the first volume last year and gave it 5 stars. I thought that this was a good follow-up, solid follow-up. Not as good as volume 1, but still gave it 4 stars, and I am excited to pick up volume 3. This is going to be a relatively short series. It's only going to be 4 volumes. This is, I think, Scholastic, their graphic novel imprint called Graphics, is trying to tap into the manga industry and pull series that are great for middle grade readers. I think that this one is a great read for middle grade readers. I know that there are a lot of teens that are getting into manga and graphic novels and comics, but I'm still trying to figure out, especially manga wise, what would be great for that middle grade tween audience. And I think that this one is one that would definitely be a hit. I don't know if I said it, but I did give that one 4 stars. Next thing that I ended up reading was not my favorite in terms of the middle grade category. It's The Ordinary and Extraordinary Auden Green. It's by Corey Ann Haydu, and I haven't read Corey Ann before, so this could just be a conflict of me as a reader and Corey's writing style. When I originally decided to pick this book up, I think because I saw that it may have been getting a little bit of buzz on social media from publishers, and so I was like, okay, I saw the copy on Libby when I had checked it out. I saw the copy, I bought the copy, but either way, I went back and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna listen to this one. I somewhere along the lines missed that this was going to be a fantasy book. I don't know how I missed it. I'm not sure how I missed it. It's not hardcore fantasy. It's more of a contemporary fantasy where we're following a main character by the name of Auden. And she doesn't like going by Auden. I can't remember what her nickname is, like the name that she likes going by. And she is 12 years old, or they're about to turn 12. I think they're about to turn 12. And her mother is an alcoholic. And she has his best friend. They're really close, but the best friend is kind of taking her own path. And she thinks that everything that Auden is doing is babyish. Especially, they created this magical world and they, would write it down in their notebooks. It felt a little D&D, but not really at the same time. But they would create this magical world. They would write it in their notebooks. And it's something that the two of them shared. They're about to come up on their birthday party, but Auden's best friend's like, hey, I don't want it to be babyish. I'm, starting to fit in with these new girls at school. Well, these popular girls at school, I should say. And, I want you to fit in with us, but you keep doing babyish stuff and it's not working out for me the way you're acting. And at the same time, Auden is struggling because her mom is an alcoholic that will not get help. Her father enables and expects Auden to change her mother. I struggled with this book a lot. I gave it 3 stars, and I think I was generous in my 3 stars, and really it should be like a 2 or 2.5 because I did not like the execution of this. Part of the fantastical element is that the princess that they created in this fantasy world, they swap places. Auden and this princess swap places. I don't understand why. I guess to help each other, I don't know. It was just weird to me because I was like, if this would have stayed a realistic fiction book, I think I would have been able to get down with it. I think introducing the fantastical elements, I didn't quite get it. The enabling that came with the dad, I was blown away. I did not like any adults in this book whatsoever. And I don't think that the resolution that we got in the end was enough. And I'm not saying I'm the type of person too where I like realistic endings, but if we're going to do an apology, I need it to be full-blown apology, right? I think down to the last minute, her dad was still talking about how she needed to give up what she wanted to do because that her mother needed her support. Maybe there's bias coming into this too because I am a parent. I don't know. I just didn't like the execution of this one at all. It's such an important topic and it is stuff that kids experience, but it was the way that it was handled and the way that it was done that I was just not a fan of. So with that being said, that least favorite of the month for me, hands down. The next one that I read was Nishama. This is one that I ended up picking up because it was a Youth Media Awards winner. What did it get? I believe it got the Sidney Taylor Award for middle grade. And I decided to go ahead and listen to it. It's another book that's written in free verse. We're following a main character, and this is by Marcella Pixley. Sorry. We're following a main character who can see ghosts. And she comes from a Jewish family, although they're not heavily practicing. Her mother isn't, but her father is. They don't practice, but her grandmother is. And she can see ghosts, and she gets bullied a lot at school. The bullying in this one was intense. The content, I have to give content warnings for this one because the bullying and the anti-Semitism in this one it was overwhelming. I don't know if I wasn't expecting it, but I mean, she gets bullied at school. The teachers believe that there's something wrong with her. Even her grandmother doesn't really fully believe that she can talk to ghosts, but she can talk to ghosts. And then she meets the ghost of her aunt, and her aunt helps her figure out some family secrets. And there's a point in which the aunt inhabits her body, and this is where it fell flat a little bit for me because the voice between the aunt and the main character, they weren't separate enough. They felt very, very close together. Although I think that this book was a great lesson in grief and anger and forgiveness and how those three can be so closely linked to each other. And I also wish that because of the complexity of the bullying that was happening at school, I wish we would have gone back to that a little bit. I think that we touched on that, and that was such a significant element in the beginning of the book. And we do touch on it, but I feel like the family secret took over, that we almost didn't tighten up those loose ends with the bullying that happened at school. But it was still an enjoyable read. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Then I went on to read some more tween romances because that was just the thing that I was doing. this month. So I read 2 books that are part of the Spotlight Sprinkle series. The first is Meet Me at Sunset, and the second is Written in the Stars. These are both by Lee Hart, which I'm pretty sure that is a pen name. I don't think that is a legitimate author. I don't know. I could be wrong, but it feels very pen name-ish. And they are in a series, but each book kind of works as its own like standalone. So in this first one, Meet Me at Sunset, we are following a main character by the name of Sophia, and Sophia has this crush on this boy named James, right? Sophia has lied to everybody, but she's exaggerated. Sophia's like, yeah, you know, like he's my boyfriend. Her and James spoke one time. And it's not Sophia. I'm sorry. Sophia is the person who comes to to visit her. Oh my goodness gracious. Her name is Jules, if I'm not mistaken, right? Yes, Julie. Sorry. I'm like, why do I think that name is not right? Because it's not right. So we're following a main character by the name of Julie, and Julie likes James. But Julie has exaggerated about how much James likes her and the nature of their relationship. She done went and told everybody at school that her and James are in a relationship. James and her have talked once, and it was when they both were at an ice cream place. And it was in passing. So Sophia, she doesn't know really if she wants to consider Sophia a friend or not. Sophia is coming to this beach house with her and her family for 3 weeks. And so she's kind of told Sophia the truth. And she's like, hey, you know, I kind of didn't tell the truth or whatever. And it becomes this like mission, like make James fall for me. And I think it's a good lesson in you should not change yourself for anybody, because let me tell you, Julie went to go change everything about herself for this boy. And Sophia, poor Sophia in the background was like, girl, please stop. Like, this boy is not worth it. Actually, he's crappy. He's a crap person. It was really, really cute. I think that the lesson in it was something worth hearing, even for adults, to be honest with you, that no person is worth you changing yourself for. Not that you don't grow. I think there's a difference between growing with someone and I'm gonna lie and say I like strawberry ice cream because you like strawberry ice cream, or I'm gonna lie and say I love hiking because I know that that's something that you like to do. And that for this age group, that's really, really great. I think my biggest pet peeve about this one is that it did read a little bit on the repetitive side. So that's why I only ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Now, Written in the Starlight was completely different. Written in the Starlight, because y'all know I'm horrible with names, is a book in the series that follows main character by the name of Quinn. Quinn is headed to summer camp, and Quinn has just recently lost her father to an illness. And so she's going to camp for the first time without him kind of being there. So she's navigating this grief, and then she ends up meeting this boy at camp by the name of Harry. I don't know how I remember his name. She ends up meeting this boy at camp by the name of Harry, and Harry's from England. And this one, as opposed to Meet Me at Sunset, Written in the Stars is more of a, what do you do when everybody's trying to force you together? Which you're kind of like, I'm not ready for that. I have a lot going on, and I think like I like you, but also like I have a lot going on. So this one's more about peer pressure, which I think is really, really great. I think that the camp elements in this were really, really good. The conversations about grief and kind of reworking this relationship with her mother as her mother is also navigating her grief. I felt like this one had a little bit more complexity to it than Meet Me at Sunset, but both great tween romances that tackle two very, very different like subcategories of dating at that age. Okay, and the last two that we have, I'm trying to hurry up now because it looks like my battery is going to go kaput on me here in a split second, and I still have 2 sections that I need to get through. But the next one that I have on my list here is Octopus Moon by Bobby Pyron. This is my first Bobby Pyron book. This one won the Schneider Family Book honor for middle grade, and that is a book award that is given out for disability representation in children's literature. And this one follows a main character by the name of Pearl, and Pearl is seemingly everything is going good. They're in 5th grade, they're having conversations about starting 6th grade, and then Pearl's kind of behavior and her work ethic starts going in a steady decline. And eventually you figure out that Pearl is struggling with depression. And so this book is more so about her navigating her struggles with depression. I think this is a very great perspective of what depression looks like in children, but also in some ways a tad bit, now don't get me wrong, I like this book, so I gave it 4 stars, but it can be a tad bit unrealistic. And the author does make note of the fact that this is one of those situations where in a perfect world where parents, teachers, administration, everyone notices these symptoms and signs of depression in a child, which that's not always the case, especially if they're at this age where we're expecting them to become a little bit more moody, and you know, we may have families where depression is not something that's necessarily acknowledged, and we do have conversations about that, about generationally how we look at depression, describe depression, whether we view it as a true illness or not, changes from generation to generation. And a lot of that hits very close to home for Pearl in ways that were completely unexpected for me as a reader. I thought that this was really, really great. As someone who has major depressive disorder, who has gone through extensive therapy, been medicated, etc. for it, it's interesting to see what that looks like in a child. It's very therapy positive, and I love that we as readers get to sit in on Pearl's therapy sessions. It was just a very, very great book, and I'm glad that it did win, because I don't know that I would have made time for everything that I typically read in a year. I can't read everything. I don't know if I would have made time necessarily to get to this book, and I'm glad that my hand was forced to at this point because of the awards. And the last thing that I have in the middle grade section is one of my favorite books. This was my favorite book of January. It is a nonfiction book, A World Without Summer by Nicholas Day. The art's by Yaz Imamura. Oh my gosh, this is so good. So this is about the explosion of Tambora and how the eruption of this volcano changed the landscape of the planet, which is, I did not know that this was a thing. I know I talked about this in my most recent vlog, but I did not know that this was a thing where literally the entire landscape of the planet changed for a year and longer, where the sun was not shining. There was no heat coming to the earth, where we had winter in the middle of summer. And what Nicholas does in this is takes us a step further and talks about the literature, the music, the inventions that come from this, and what different nations were doing at this time in terms of how the volcano impacted them, even the theories and the guesses that people made that were so wholly inaccurate, but not really having the science then to determine like what was the connection between climate change and the eruption of this volcano. And then there's this full circle moment about the impact that humans have on the environment. And though Nicholas doesn't outright say it, he leads you to that final question of how much more impact do we have to make for people to wake up and realize that these changes are already happening. Like, this climate thing has already happened once. If you think it can't happen again, that's absolutely foolish. And so what do we have to do? What has to happen for us to have that realization? Because at the end of the day, these small changes seem to not be enough. And yet we have the data that proves that climate change is absolutely happening. I looked at the average temp change, like the average temp of what it's supposed to be here in January, and it was an 18-degree difference in average temp. That is a huge difference. That is a major difference. And so if you don't believe that, I just don't know. People believe that climate change is a thing when we see it happening in real time. This is one of the best middle grade nonfiction books that I have ever read. This author also did Mona Lisa Vanishes, and when I get to work tomorrow, I will be putting this book on hold, The Mona Lisa Vanishes, because it's the format in which this is it's told, right? So there's illustrations in this, there's parts where he's asking like readers questions. It's just written in a very accessible and fun way for ages 8 to 12, like hands down, just excellent work. Moving on to our YA category. First, we have Heartsick by Christina Forrest. This was the first book that I read in 2026, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. This is a contemporary, I mean, it's a romance, but then there's this weird, almost like sci-fi-ish element to it where people can take a pill to get over their heartbreak. And while I do think the book is a great lesson in like that heartbreak is just a necessary part of the human experience, I don't think that it worked as well as the author intended. And honestly, I wasn't there for that. I was more there for the romantic elements between our two main characters who end up dating for I think a little over a year. They break up, and then our heroine sees the hero go to the clinic to take the pill, and he's contemplating it, but he doesn't really do it. And then they're kind of forced in the situation where they have to reckon with their breakup and their experience, and it's kind of about them finding their way back to each other. And I like that so much. I wasn't really fascinated by the clinical experimental aspect of it and like the mystery almost that exists, because there's something going wrong with the pills where people are now getting sick from taking them. And so we have this mystery element. I don't know. I just felt like that part wasn't developed enough for me to be really invested in it. And I was more invested in the romance that was going to exist between our two characters. So while it was a decent read, it wasn't my favorite coming from Christina Forrest. And like I said, I gave that one 3.5 stars. Next, I ended up reading The Thorn Season by Kira Azar. This is the Fairy Loot October book, I think. Yeah. So one of my goals this year is to make sure that I am reading my book box subscription books. And so I made sure that I at least read 2 this month. The same thing, I'm trying to make sure I'm reading them as I receive them. So this one follows a main character by the name of Alyssa. She is an heiress to this noble lineage, but she is a wielder, and wielders are not supposed to have access to the life that she has. It's a secret that she's a wielder. And so what ends up happening is she gets drawn into this really complicated court intrigue situation where it looks like somebody has done something to her father. She has this childhood best friend that their relationship becomes complicated because he's been trained to kill people like her. And it just becomes this really, really weird thing where she has to go to the palace to deal with this wild behind prince because she's looking for this compass that will lead the owner of the compass to all of the wielders to basically get rid of them. It is a very interesting character journey because I think that in the beginning, as a reader, you see how selfish she is, self-motivated, and why she wants to find this compass. And then it becomes kind of an evolution of also respecting other people, doing it for the greater good. Now, there are 3 potential love interests in this book, and I thought like I'm going to absolutely hate the fact that there are 3 potential love interests in this book. Not true. These 3 men, so you have the childhood best friend, you have a rebel, That's the best way I can describe it. And then you have the prince. When I tell you these three men are so drastically different from each other, and she has very complicated relationships with all three of them, and they all get their equal play on page. And when I tell you I'm interested in seeing, and this is typically not me, especially because I always feel like, you know what, like every book doesn't need romance, but this is a romantasy. So it is going to have, the romantic element is going to be strong there. Although, while this is labeled as a romantasy, the political intrigue and the world building was actually really, really good. So it wasn't just about the romance. Like, it really was these intricate character dynamics and growth and intricate plotting. And there were some pacing issues. I think in the middle, it kind of slowed down just a little bit. But my goodness gracious, this book had me like on the edge of my seat, because it was scene after scene after scene, twist after twist. And I was like, yo, did not see that coming. This is one of the few books, because there's another one that I really, really enjoyed this year that's in the adult category, or I keep saying this month, that I really, really enjoyed, that I'm also really excited for the sequel. But I am looking forward to the sequel of this one because I want to learn more about the magic system. I want to learn more about the characters in this book. This was good. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was well worth the read. I also ended up reading Cursed Princess Club. Can't tell you much about it because it's the second book in the series, but I gave this one 5 stars. Lamb Cat shows out so much. I cannot wait to dive, and I may make that a goal to go ahead and dive into volume 3 this month. This was really, really good. Just as good as the first volume. It's a very cute, charming, endearing series, and it's overall about our perceptions of beauty, like what is considered standard in terms of beauty. But this one is about self-love, right? And I was not expecting that. And it was just done really, really well. Like I said, can't say much about it, but definitely well worth. Love it down. Love it down. Next, I have Ao Haru Ride Volume 2. This was a series that I told myself I also need to work on completing slowly, because I own the entire series. Just read it volume by volume, even if it's just a volume a month. Once again, another series that, well, this particular volume I can't tell you much about, but it does focus on 2 characters who did have feelings for each other when they were younger, and now they're older. And it's kind of this question of, if you've liked someone in the past, especially at a younger age, do those feelings stay the same as you evolve? Because they are evolving as characters, or evolving as people. They're changing, and so you're not going to be the same person. So can you love the person that you once? Can you love the person that exists now as the person that you once loved? It's really interesting. And this one kind of ended on a cliffhanger that I was not anticipating, but I did end up giving that 4 stars. And then the last thing I read in the young adult category is No Rules Tonight. This is also kind of a sequel. This is by Kim Hyun-suk, and this follows the Banned Book Club. You don't have to read the Banned Book Club to read this. However, I personally recommend it because it's not sold as a series per se, but I recommend reading it in sequential order because it builds. So the characters that you see in No Rules Tonight are some of the characters that are from Banned Book Club. And I think there are some references to things that happened in Banned Book Club. And what ended up happening is that I was going to read the 3rd one, but then I realized that I had not read No Rules Tonight, and it is following these group of Korean youth who are dealing with the strictness of the government, the curfews, the book banning, the inability to like listen to certain types of music. And I didn't know that South Korea went through that period of upheaval, and you see them go through so much. And it's interesting because there's all this stuff going on in the background, right, with the government, and they still are trying to have somewhat of a normal youth experience with friendships and going on trips and falling in love. And it's great. And this is all based on Kim's actual experiences, although it's condensed in time. And of course, things are changed to protect identities of people. But just like Banned Book Club, like I enjoyed this one, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. All right, on to our adult section really quickly. We have The Warlord Wants Forever. This is the novella that serves as a prequel for the Immortals After Dark series, which I am currently reading the first one in this series. And I really found this one to be interesting. I gave it 3 stars. I think that this is a paranormal romance of its time. There are some really interesting elements there. The relationship dynamics is not what I was really invested in, because it is a relationship between a vampire and a Valkyrie, which I'd never seen that before. But the way that it happens is kind of like, it's interesting. Like, she awakens him and then like he lusts for her very strongly. So there were some interesting, steamy, really hot elements in this one. Wasn't really sold 100% on the relationship dynamics, but the world was very fascinating, and I'm glad that I actually did end up reading that one, because it gives me a lot of context for this one. So going into this one, what I'm reading now, a lot of it makes sense in context of reading that novella. So I'm glad that I did. But I could see why this series is a comfort series for people and why people enjoy it so much. I also ended up reading the Build a Boyfriend project. This is the Illuminate version of the book by Mason Deaver. This follows 2 main characters, Peter and Eli. And Eli is transmask, and he works at this magazine, but he wants to be a more serious writer, and it's just not working out. He's basically serving as an executive assistant for the moment. He ends up at the beginning, he's going through a breakup from a 7-year relationship, and I keep saying, like, about this book, I really resonated with the fact that Mason Deaver pointed out how you can be in a relationship for years, and in 10 minutes someone can say, I don't want to do this anymore, and it's over. So all that time is then like thrown away in such a short period of time, and that can be ultimately like very devastating. So that is what Eli is dealing with at the beginning of this book. But then his friends are like, you need to go out. You need to try dating. And so he ends up going on a blind date with Peter. It goes horribly wrong, so that they make this deal that Eli is going to teach Peter how to date, and Eli is going to write an article about it. And it ends up being really messy, and you know that it's not going to go well, but it was very interesting seeing it play out. It really gives insight to dating, like in the queer community, and what it's like, especially from Peter's perspective, to be queer and Asian and live in the South. And, you know, even Eli acknowledges, like, kind of, even with him being queer, being trans, you know, the experiences that he's had are going to be so different than the layered experiences that Peter will have, like the racism on top of like the homophobia. It was really well written. I am a huge fan of Mason Deaver's writing. So at this point, because I've read 2 books by Mason Deaver and I've enjoyed both of them, I think that anything they read at this point, like, I'm just going to be down for the count. This was their first adult romance, and I thought it was pretty good for a first adult romance, and I gave it 4 stars. So I'm excited to read more by Mason this year. Hopefully I get to read more by Mason this year, because it was really interesting. It was just, the setup of it was interesting. The last thing that I ended up reading in our adult category is Warrior Princess Assassin by Bridget Kemmerer. Now, I've said before, I've read Bridget Kemmerer. I read A Curse So Dark and Lovely and gave it 4 stars. I really did end up enjoying that book. This is her jump into adult fantasy, romantasy, and I didn't know what to expect. Although people that I trust had been giving this one high reviews, like they were like, it's good, it's well worth a read. I did not know. I'm happy about it. I did not know that this is a poly romance, which it was done so well. We're following 3 main characters, Kai, Jory, and Asher, and Jory is being forced by her brother to marry Kai. She's betrothed to Kai because her brother wants to unite the two kingdoms in terms of safety, and the politics behind it would work in their favor if that happens. But she's heard horrible things about him and his ability to wield fire and what that means for anybody that's been betrothed to him before. And so she just doesn't want to do it. She has a childhood best friend by the name of Asher. Asher, unfortunately, ends up in a situation where he becomes an assassin. His mother was present when Jory's mother was killed. And so his mother ends up having to take responsibility for it because she doesn't die. It's a whole messy situation. And Asher is also sold into slavery at some point. There is some content warnings in this for sexual assault, and things that he experiences while he is sold off. So essentially, Kai gets to the kingdom, things go wrong. Somebody tries to kill Kai and Jory, tries to make Asher look like he did it, or he was a part of it, or he was in on it, and then the three of them are on the run, right? There's not a lot particularly that happens in this book, and somebody pointed this out to me in the comments because I was like, I don't know why I was able to listen to this one audio. Not a lot happens in this first book. This is very much so a character-driven book at first, where we are getting to know these three. And I think that things are going to change once we get into the second book. And best believe, let me tell you, I'm so ready for the second book. I'm so excited for the second book. The chemistry, now Jory is in there, and listen, one of my biggest things, there's two things that did not make this a perfect book for me. It wasn't a 5-star rate, it's a 4.5. The reason why, Jory reads young, and I think that's because Bridget is used to writing younger heroines. Everything that she has done before has been teen, and the heroines have been younger. So Jory does read young. And a part of that could also be because she's just inexperienced in the world. And so there's this sort of like naivety that comes with her as a character. And then the pacing sometimes was a little off. But let me tell you, Asher and Kai, baby, Asher and Kai. Yes. Those my babies. Those my men's. Yes. The angst. The build up. This is a slow burn. If you think you're going to read this and in 30 pages you're going to see some hanky-panky time, you're wrong. Okay? Because nothing happens to about 90-something% into this book, and then you're like, whoa. Where? This was so good. If it wasn't for those two elements, this would have been a 5-star book. It was almost a 5-star book. This is another book that I am anxiously awaiting the new release. I am excited to pick up the next book in this series. Yeah, this was a good one. If you are hesitant in picking this up, let me be your person to let you know that don't be hesitant. It's well worth the read. All right, y'all. So those are all the books that I ended up reading in the month of January. I know it's a lot. If I end up reading this much in February, which I'm kind of on track by the time this video goes up, I at least already have finished at least 3 books, which probably it will be more because right now I'm putting away a book a day. I may do a mid-month for February because it's a lot, but either way, that's irrelevant right now. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. If you're looking for ways to follow me on social media or support this channel, all the links and information will be down in the description box below, and I will be back with another video soon. Oh, I should probably say, like, in the comments, let me know what you read in January. I hate when I do that and I forget to ask y'all a question. Let me know what you read in January. What was a book that you like and what was a book that you didn't like? Now I can say I'll be back with another video soon. Bye.